PlayStation is one of the biggest names in the video game industry. I'd be hard pressed to find anyone who hasn't heard of the brand before, and it's of no surprise as PlayStation is constantly innovating, has strong third-party support, is always highlighting talented young indie developers, and has one of the strongest first-party portfolios that makes owning any generation of the PlayStation feel special. In this series, I plan to go on a journey through the full history of the PlayStation brand, discovering every game, big and small, that released in my region. I want to see the accessories, I want to learn the evolution of some of gaming's biggest franchises, and I want to unravel just what are the best games from each year in the complete history of PlayStation. It is a pretty impossible task, maybe, but it doesn't mean that we can't try and see them all. So join me on this huge endeavour as we explore every PlayStation game, starting with the launch of the PSOne on the 29th of September 1995. Now, on that launch day, the little grey box saw 9 games to pick up and play. Not a massive list, but still a lot of worlds and polygons to discover. So let's check them out. PlayStation's very first 3D fighting game was Battle Arena Toshinden, which was developed by Tamsoft, a studio that is still going today with their Onichambara and Senran Kagura games. Battle Arena Toshinden was so prestigious that Sony got timed exclusivity for the game and utilised it in nearly all of their marketing campaigns for the PlayStation, as this was the first full 3D fighter thanks to its revolutionary sidestep mechanic. While Sega had Virtua Fighter, the PlayStation had Battle Arena Toshinden, and one of the playable characters, Russian dominatrix Sofia, kind of became an unofficial mascot for the PlayStation early in its life cycle. While not the main character of the game, she was used in most of the promotional material for the game, and, well, it's obvious to see why. Like most early fighting games, the plot of Battle Arena Toshinden is thin, revolving around a fighting tournament which saw competitors around the globe enter to win for their own personal goals. The game features 8 playable characters and 2 secret unlockable bosses, all of which feature different combat styles, personalities and appearances. Battle Arena Toshinden's main attractions are the sidestep mechanic, where you can roll around your opponent making full use of the 3D capabilities of the PlayStation, and the focus on weapons-based fighting styles over the more traditional hand-to-hand combat of early fighting games. Here, each character features a unique weapon that have different ranges and combos and will influence which character you gravitate towards. Do you choose Rungo Iron with his giant club, or the French knight Duke Rambert with his broadsword, Faux-Fi with his ninja claws and magic, or maybe you saw the advertisements and want to play as Sophia with her long-range whip. Each of the stages is a platform which you or your opponent can fall off and be defeated by if you reach too close to the edge, and this does open up some fun tactics when battling. There's a really nice charming style about Battle Arena Toshinden, as it feels like it has a strong mix of both Asian and Western influences. Like you've got some medieval imagery with the castle and the knight, but then there's the Asian mysticism with Faux-Fi and Ellis characters. And then even like a neon cyberpunk vibe with some of the other stages. It doesn't fall into any single category and theme, and that really does make it quite an interesting fighting game experiment, and a successful one at that. Battle Arena Toshinden would sell over 1 million copies on the PlayStation alone. The game was a technical achievement with its transparent effects, shading techniques, sidestep mechanic that evolved the fighting game genre, and the iconic Sophia character that certainly sold some copies of the game all by herself. It also benefited from being one of the best launch games to support up to 2 players. Lead PlayStation engineer and later CEO Ken Kutaragi even stated in a 1995 interview that the game he was most impressed with so far on the console was Battle Arena Toshinden. Full 3D was the PlayStation's most lauded selling point, and that takes us into our next major launch title, the first full 3D platforming game. Jumping Flash was a co-production between 3 different studios: Exact, who developed the game engine and mechanics, Ultra, who designed the plot and the cutscenes, and Sony's Japan studio, who overlooked the project and published the game. This was one of Sony's first party titles available on the console's launch, and they planned to have the main star Robert become as popular as Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog and Nintendo's Mario. Jumping Flash is a collectathon 3-dimensional platformer that also featured some light, first-person shooter gameplay, making it vastly different to the platformers of the time and even still today. You take control of Robert, a mechanized rabbit that sets out to rescue the world from the evil Baron Aloha, who has taken various landmasses from around the globe to use in his own theme park. Each level is based within one of these biomes, ranging from the Great Pyramids of Giza to a huge city, Volcano Island, and more. Your main objective in each stage is to find a number of jet pods that resemble large carrots, and then make it to the level exit before time runs out. In your way are a wide range of enemies that wander around and attack you when you're within range. And every third level will be a battle against one of the wacky boss characters. The most impressive aspect of Jumping Flash, however, are the stages themselves. These are built in full 3D polygons with no 2D sprites used for environmental detail or item pickups. Even your laser blasts are in 3D. And the stages are tall as they are large, with Robert being able to jump up to 3 times high in order to reach floating platforms and certain jet pods. When you initiate a double or triple jump, the first person camera will automatically pan down so you can adjust clearly where you want to land, which is a really innovative mechanic. The perspective is also decorated as if you were looking through the eyes of Robert itself, like your jet pod counter bounces at the top of the display when you move, and the screen fuzzes when you take damage. Jumping Flash is a very creative game, blending that first-person shooter experience that was on the rise with the colourful platforming goodness popularised by Sony's biggest competitors. Robert would defeat Baron Aloha and save the day, but unfortunately, despite his adventures being superbly imaginative, it didn't quite have the success that Sony was hoping for. Now, a portion of the PlayStation's success was its ability to play music CDs, and Sony, being a big player in the music industry themselves, capitalised on this scene from the get-go. PlayStations became popular in nightclubs during the 90s, and one game that was designed to appeal to the party crowd was our third launch title, Wipeout. The year is 2052, and you are one of the many pilots participating in the high-octane anti-gravity racing league. Wipeout was developed by Liverpool-based studio Psygnosis and is a futuristic racing game featuring weapon pickups, varied windy tracks, and a popular techno soundtrack featuring music from groups like Left Field and the Chemical Brothers. This made the game incredibly popular in the party scene and captured an entirely new music-buying audience, different from that of Jumping Flash or Battle Arena Toshinden. Wipeout took some notes from Super Mario Kart, having neon pods along the track that if you drive over them give you a boost or a weapon to either use against your opponents or defend yourself. The game comes with 4 different race teams, each with their own stats and vehicle, and 7 racetracks, which doesn't seem like much today, but these are still visually impressive with detailed, crisp backgrounds and some big air moments. Wipeout is a challenging game, with any knocks against the sides of the track massively slowing you down, and it can be tough to catch back up to first place when you fall behind. The game encourages replaying the tracks over and over until you know their layouts and the turns you need to make. Wipeout does also support a 2-player mode, but not natively, instead requiring the PlayStation Link cable and a second console and controller, which would become the game's most major flaw. Nevertheless, Wipeout was one of the earliest successes on the console and would prompt Psygnosis to continue their work with multiple sequels building upon this original game. While the difficulty was mixed with critics, Wipeout would still be applauded for its technical performance, 3D gameplay, and tight controls. But its biggest achievements were in its art design and soundtrack. Video games were starting to be seen as more than just children's toys or profitable movie merchandise. Now the people who grew up on the earlier consoles were growing up with the PlayStation along with them. If you weren't in the mood for futuristic racing and wanted tyres on the tarmac, then maybe Ridge Racer was the game for you. Ridge Racer was the only other racing game available on launch day and was developed by Tokyo-based studio Namco, best known for their popular Pac-Man series. Ridge Racer was originally an arcade game releasing 2 years prior, but saw a dedicated and exclusive console port to the PlayStation due to a close partnership with Sony and Namco, and because Sony wanted a game that could rival Sega's popular Daytona USA. Back in the 90s, arcade ports were popular displays of the console's capabilities, and Ridge Racer was certainly that, featuring impressive 3D textured graphics and an incredible techno soundtrack composed by Shinji Hoso. The idea behind Ridge Racer was to capture the thrill of the mountain drift racing that is popular with car enthusiasts in Japan. These aren't like traditional races, instead you're racing on public roads, weaving through traffic, and with drift racing, when reaching the bending mountain tracks, instead of slowing down on the turns, you drift around them as to not lose as much speed. This made the game quite unique in the racing market, although street racing with drift mechanics would become much more popular in the years to follow. Ridge Racer is light on content, featuring only 4 starting vehicles and 1 single track that can be played in 3 variations. Coming first in all 3 variations does unlock a mirror mode, and as a PlayStation exclusive extra, when loading the game up for the first time, you get to play a game of Galaxian whilst Ridge Racer continues loading in the background. This is an awesome feature that is still pretty impressive today. And the best part is, if you manage to clear all of the enemies, you will unlock additional cars to use in Ridge Racer. While it might not have been the most expansive racing game at the time and lacked any 2-player support, Ridge Racer on the PlayStation was still a technical achievement and was close enough to the arcade version. The additional benefit of being able to swap out the game disc for any of your music CDs to listen to as you drift through the mountainsides made it a racing game to own, and would become a synonymous game franchise with the launch of the following 2 PlayStation generations. So far, we have seen how the PlayStation was really pushing the leap towards 3D polygonal graphics, with some games that made almost all of its assets in 3D. These games were pushing the console's power to its near limits, and yet the PlayStation could also do 2D just as good. And no launch game made better example of this than our first ever 2D platformer on PlayStation, Rayman. Developed by a young Ubisoft Montpellier, Rayman was the studio's first successful attempt at breaking into the industry. With so much competition in the genre at the time, Rayman stood out with its bold, Celtic fairy tale influences, its charming character designs and animation, its high challenge, and of course, the star himself, Rayman. The limbless hero unlocks new abilities as you progress through the game's 6 thematic worlds. Abilities such as being able to glide with his hair acting as rotating helicopter blades, being able to punch enemies from a distance by literally throwing his fist, or using his fist to swing on obstacles. There's a great sense of variety here, not just in your abilities, but also the different levels you'll travel through and various enemies you'll have to face. However, Rayman was a lot more challenging than most other platformers aimed at a younger audience. It plays into the trial and error format a lot, having you get knocked down a few times to memorise the levels, with very little room for error if at all. You've got few continues and heavily respawning enemies that it does cause you to restart the game quite a lot, which can be frustrating. Rayman is one ruthless platformer, but that didn't stop it from still getting positive reception, selling close to 1 million copies and becoming one of the best selling PlayStation games in Europe. Ubisoft's first PlayStation outing was a major success and would prompt them to soon greenlight a Another sprite-based game available at launch was the console's first 2D fighting game, Capcom's Street Fighter the Movie, based on the 1994 film of the same name, which itself was based upon Capcom's incredibly popular arcade fighting game. This was Street Fighter's first appearance on the PlayStation, but unfortunately not their most successful. Street Fighter the Movie is your traditional one-on-one fighting game, but instead of featuring the series' staple artistic designs and sprite work, Capcom instead went with digitized graphics. And while it does look good for a 1995 release, I don't feel it holds up the best, as you lose a lot of the vibrant colour and standout backgrounds that the Street Fighter series is known for. Many of the characters resemble cheap cosplay imitations of who they're supposed to be due to bland colours and costumes. What Street Fighter the Movie did innovate with is a story mode called Movie Battle in the game, which wasn't common at all in the fighting game scene around the time. Here you take full control of Guile, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme in the film. You battle through the cast of the game, whilst also reading text box dialogue in between battles that progresses the story. It's not a thrilling story mode, only following the plot of the movie and restricting you to a single character the whole way through it, but it was a nudge in the direction of story modes and campaigns becoming more familiar in fighting games in the near future. Street Fighter the Movie is not remembered for its large roster and multiple modes to play, it is instead remembered for its heavily criticised slowdown, choppy animations and drab presentation. Not one of Capcom's best, but Street Fighter would return to the PlayStation with much stronger impressions soon. The 2D games continued with the exclusive run-and-gun shooter Rapid Reload. This game was developed by Mediavision and published by Sony Computer Japan as the PlayStation's take on the popular Sega shooter Gunstar Heroes. You have 2 playable characters, 4 different weapons, and 6 stages full of enemies to blast through as you go on a mission to find a legendary treasure before the terrorist organisation, the Pumpkinheads, find it first for their plans of global domination. Rapid Reload does bring a lot to the familiar run-and-gun format. The levels feature a lot of verticality, having you climbing platforms and using a hook to get around. You can also move in many different directions and go prone to evade the many projectiles and enemies you'll be up against. Rapid Reload also comes with a power meter at the top of the screen that you need to keep up by defeating enemies. Doing so will increase the power of your weapons and make you a force to be reckoned with. Much like Rayman as well, Rapid Reload is a beautiful game with stunning colour range, these beams of light piercing through the treetops, lots of level variety, nice sprite work, and fantastic boss designs. The only major criticism of Rapid Reload is its lack of a 2-player option, which certainly hurt its launch sales, but still a 2D game that you couldn't play on any other system at the time. Now, these final 2 launch games didn't get the recognition that they were looking for, unlike the previous 7 games, but were no less ambitious. Kileak the Blood, or also known in the US as Kileak the DNA Imperative, is a first-person shooter developed by Japanese developer Genki and was published by Sony themselves. In this game, you battle against robotic enemies through tight corridors from within a mech suit that has limited firepower and shields. You play as Matt Coda, an officer working for the International Peacekeeping Force who is sent to an Antarctic observation facility which has recently sent out a distress signal calling for help. It seems an evil Dr. Kim is planning to manufacture a clone army of mutant creatures called Kileaks. Equipped with your assault mech suit, it comes with quite a few different weapons, ranging from a traditional machine gun to a rocket launcher and a laser weapon. Some of your weapons use a limited ammunition supply, whereas the laser weapons drain your suit's energy meter, which when fully depleted is game over, so you have to play this game pretty slow and methodically, preserving your ammunition and energy the best you can. Each level takes you through the labyrinthian corridors that make up each floor of the facility, and occasionally there will be a locked doors requiring you to find a key to progress, not too dissimilar to id Software's Doom. Like that game, however, you can strafe in Kileak, which is done by using L1 and R1, something that was severely lacking in Jumping Flash. Here you can continue attacking your opponent whilst also dodging their projectiles. Like Jumping Flash, however, Kileak was also rendered in full 3D, stretching from the enemies to the environments, and the pre-rendered CGI cutscenes really make it a visually impressive game. Regardless, it still wasn't the most fun to play. Kileak is a little clunky at times, has severely repetitive stage designs, and overall isn't quite as memorable as some of the other shooters hitting the scene at the same time, lacking much visual and colour variety. Kileak the Blood didn't claim the same success as some of the other launch titles, and that was likely down to its disappointing gameplay and stage design that only featured impressive 3D architecture. Now, the final launch title for the PlayStation was the second Psygnosis game for the console, Novastorm. This was a rail shooter that combined the familiar shooting concept with backgrounds and cutscenes that utilise full motion video, something that was possible using the CD-based media of PlayStation games. But due to the large memory size of FMVs, Novastorm was one of the first PlayStation games to be fitted across more than one disc. Novastorm was another launch game out to showcase a technical achievement with the console, here having the sprites battling over a full moving, detailed background which featured early CG graphics. It captures a range of environmental detail that wouldn't have been possible using standard 3D polygonal backgrounds. The stages would have been much less detailed and the game would have run at a snail's pace. But the rest of Novastorm was fairly familiar. The shooting is unforgiving, with the amount of effects all causing chaos on the screen, and the pre-rendered backgrounds making it difficult to see what is hitting you most of the time. The story quickly lost me with its rough acting and poor blue screen effects, and easily the most taxing part of Novastorm is it being split into 2 discs. Beat the levels on disc 1, and then the game asks you to play disc 2. But if you get game over during the second disc levels, you then have to switch back to disc 1 and start the game all over again. With the frustrating difficulty, this is a game breaker. If you take out all of the gameplay, shooting aspects, and the live action scenes, then you have a pretty impressive tech demo here. But with the rest of the baggage, Novastorm is one launch title to leave on the shelf. And that was all 9 games available at the PlayStation's launch in September 1995. My top game of the month is easily Jumping Flash. I think it is certainly one of the most underrated platformers on the original PlayStation. Let me know your favourite in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode as we continue through the launch year of the original PlayStation, covering every game on the system. Thanks so much for watching, and take care.